Learning objectives are a critical part of a standards-based curricular and instructional system. Knowing how to construct appropriate learning objectives is an important responsibility of teachers. In order to understand what learning objectives are, we need to take a step back and understand what goals are. Goals are general statements of desired learning. They describe summative outcomes of what students should know and be able to do. Academic content standards are goals for student learning. Learning objectives are specific statements of what students should know, be able to do, and understand at the end of a lesson. Like a hurdler, the goal is to win the race, but the objective is to get over the hurdle. Learning objectives are student-centered. They are standards-based but are statements of the specific learning targets for daily lessons. Learning objectives describe outcomes, not activities. This non-example of a student-centered objective shows that the student is being passive by just hearing. The focus of this objective is the teacher, since the action of the objective is a lecture by the teacher. In this correct example of a student-centered objective, even though the student is observing a lecture or demonstration, the objective of the lesson is the student completing a graph. Learning objectives are written in a specific and purposeful way that guides teacher lesson planning and communicates student daily learning outcomes. Lesson plans can be for one day or multiple days, but are based upon a specifically stated learning objective. As with SMART goals, learning objectives need to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant and results-oriented, and time-bound. Learning objectives should be specific. To be specific, a learning objective must provide a concise description of what is to be learned. It should be stated in student-centered terms, describing what students will know, be able to do, and understand at the end of the lesson. Learning objectives state the expected outcomes simply, concisely, and as explicitly as possible. They should state exactly what is to be accomplished by the student. This objective is not specific, since taking notes is just an activity and has little potential for learning. This example of a learning objective that is specific shows the action that a student will take to demonstrate learning. Creating a graphic organizer is the act of the student and will show the student's learning. Learning objectives should be measurable. They must define what is acceptable accomplishment and what level of learning is considered successful. These statements of success must be quantifiable. Learning objectives should establish concrete criteria for what students should know, be able to do, and understand. Measurable learning objectives state the outcomes that can be assessed in definite and specific ways. This is an example of a learning objective that is not measurable. It is not clear what students are to learn as they discover what is an indeterminate number of things that exist in a meadow. Which ones are to be measured is the question. This is an example of a learning objective that is measurable. It requires students to describe 12 plant species and 12 animal species. Learning objectives should be attainable. They should be written at the appropriate developmental levels for the student's success. Learning objectives should direct planning that leads to learning activities that will assure successful student learning of the content. They must be challenging, yet give students a realistic chance to accomplish the learning. Even though students are able to be in groups, this example does not explain enough of the group work to be challenging or developmentally appropriate for most grade levels. Students in preschool can play in groups, but this level of student effort is not sufficiently challenging for older students. This is a better example of group work and a learning objective that is attainable. Collaborating is much more descriptive of what students should be able to do in group work, and it expresses a more challenging effort for students as they solve geometry problems. Learning objectives should be relevant and results-oriented. They should focus on the results of learning or learning outcomes. Learning objectives should focus lesson planning on content that is interesting and necessary for students to know, be able to do, and understand. This example of a learning objective is not relevant or results-oriented. It does not represent any results-oriented statements that show learning outcomes. Even though it mentions the Internet, which is a relevant and interesting learning activity, it is not focused on using the Internet in a way that is interesting to students. This example of a learning objective is both relevant and results-oriented. It is relevant because it has students doing the interesting Internet work. This objective is results-oriented because it asks students to locate 5 sources of information about a specific topic, and thus is an outcome of student effort. Learning objectives should be time-bound. They must have a specific ending point, so what students should know, are able to do, and understand can be formatively measured. This learning objective is not time-bound, since it does not specify when the students will complete the evaluation. Stated the way it is, this objective could carry on indefinitely into the future. By adding a phrase to the previous objective, it becomes an appropriate time-bound learning objective. Learning objectives can be made SMART by using Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains, primarily the cognitive domain. Utilizing Bloom's taxonomy will help make learning objectives specific, measurable, attainable, and results-oriented. Bloom introduced his learning domains in 1956. In 2001, Lauren Anderson introduced a modern version of Bloom's taxonomy. Whichever taxonomy is used, the words connected to the taxonomy are essential as the verbs of learning objective statements. There are many lists of Bloom words that can be used to select the exact verb needed for a well-constructed learning objective. These Bloom words are categorized into the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Spending time to determine the correct verb from the Bloom word list is critical. This chart is a graphic representation of the levels of Bloom words. It uses the original Bloom's taxonomy located at the center, with each Bloom level represented by a piece of the pie. The orange ring lists a few of the words that work at each level of Bloom's taxonomy. In this particular diagram, the green ring even gives the types of activities that will support learning at each level of Bloom. This learning objective uses the Bloom word compare. This word falls under the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy and helps the teacher plan the complexity of the activities to support learning in the lesson. This learning objective uses a Bloom word design, which is at the synthesis level of Bloom's taxonomy. This is a higher order level of Bloom and requires students to show knowledge, comprehension, application, and analysis in order to complete the synthesis activity of the lesson. Again, it tells the teacher how complex the learning activities need to be for student learning. Even though they are on some Bloom lists, there are some words that are too general, lack specificity, and are unable to be measured. These weasel words should be avoided. Examples of these weasel words include imagine, comprehend, understand, know, appreciate, see, explore, expose to, learn, familiar with, realize, sense of, and discover. Again, these words are not specific or measurable and should be avoided in learning objective construction. Examples of acceptable Bloom words give a sense of action. Students can do these words, which requires them to know as well. These words allow teachers to construct effective learning objectives that are specific and measurable. Now we can look at putting this all together into appropriately constructed learning objectives. This first learning objective fits the SMART requirement. It is specific using the Bloom word explain, which is at the comprehensive level. It is measurable in requiring 2 causes. It is attainable since it's only asking for 2 causes and not more. Asking for causes makes it results-oriented. And it is based on 8th grade standards, so it is relevant. It is time-bound since the students must explain by the end of the lesson. This learning objective is specific, asking for a critique that is at the evaluation level of Bloom. It is measurable with the 1-page requirement. This learning objective is attainable since it only asks for 1 day and not the whole diary. It is relevant, drawing on a recent historical topic. It is time-bound, being due at the end of the lesson. This learning objective uses Bloom's synthesis level by asking students to hypothesize. It is measurable since students must produce a hypothesis. The learning objective is based on high school chemistry standards, which makes it attainable. It is results-oriented by asking students to produce an atomic level hypothesis. And it is time-bound since the students produce the hypothesis after observing an experiment. This learning objective is specific because it asks students to draw, which is at the knowledge level of Bloom. It is measurable because it has students produce a drawing. It is attainable since it is based upon kindergarten standards. It's relevant because the students were given examples of the objects to be drawn. And it's time-bound because the students will do their drawings right after the demonstration. After developing these appropriately constructed learning objectives, the teacher is ready to plan the lesson. Learning activities are planned that are based upon the learning objectives. If you want to become proficient at creating learning objectives, you are encouraged to study Ann Reeves' book, Where Great Teaching Begins, Planning for Student Thinking and Learning. And if you want more information about Bloom's taxonomy, check out these internet sites.